Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janmadhyasya yatam vayaritarataccate swavigyasvara. Tenne Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Mojantija Suraya. Tejo Varim Rida Jata Vinimajo Jatra Trisagumrusya. Damnasvena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth. I meditate upon Lord Krishna because and the primeval cause of all causes, of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestation.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is completely independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And he is completely independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he who first imparted Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
The original living being.
the original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by illusory representation. So water seen the fire, or a land seen the water. Because of him, only because he do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universes,
temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of nature,
temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature,
appear factual although they are unreal.
appear factual although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon Krishna,
which is eternally existence in the transcendental abode,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental world,
which is forever free from the reaction of the material modes of nature.
which is forever free from the illusionary representations of the material world.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma Pujita Kaitravota
Dharma Prujita Kaitava
Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam
Paramo Nirmasrana
Vedyam Vastavam Atravastu
Vedyam Vastavam Astravastu
Shivadam Tapa Trayon Mulanam
Shivadam Tapa Trayo
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni
Kim Vapurir Ishwaraha Sadyo Hridi Avarudhyate Tra
Sadyo Rudya Varudya Titra
Kriti Bihi Sasusabhistakshana
Kriti Bhi Shushrushabhista Kyanan,
completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
completely rejecting all religious activities from material
This
motivated.
Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Puran propounds the high truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in
The
heart.
highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
They have to the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold mysteries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold
This
mystery.
beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in its maturity
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva is maturity.
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
It's sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other
As
scripture?
soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively, submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
by this culture of knowledge,
by its culture and
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam,
Nigam kalpator galitam
sukha mukhad amrita dravya samyatam,
Sukha mukhad vridravisan
pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam,
Dibata Bhagavatam Rasam
muhur aho raska bhuvi pavukaha,
Mura Hora Sika Bhutta
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagvatam,
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam,
the mature fruit of the desired tree Vedic literatures.
the mature fruit, the desired fruit, Vedic literature.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Shukadeva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this fruit has become more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice is already relishable for all,
Although its nectarine juice was already relishable to all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shavatam Swakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Hiryantak Stohid Badrani,
Vidyantastu Yabhadrani,
Vidunati Sritsatam.
Vidunoti Suritsatam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from Vedic
or
literature,
to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from him directly,
is itself righteous activity.
it is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
And one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone,
acts as a best-wishing friend,
acts as the best wishing friend,
and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies the voice constantly engaged in hearing.
Nasta presu bhadresu nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata
bhagavati utamasloke
Bhagavati Tamasloke
bhaktir bhavati naistaki.
Bhakti Bhavati Nasti.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, the words naturally develop this dormant transcendental.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
And he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the
he
devotees.
becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
He becomes fixed in the devotional service of God.
Tadarajas tumo bhava
Tadarajastamo Bhava,
kamalobhadayaschaye
Kamalobhadayascha,
cheta itairanavidam
Chaitanya
stitvam sattve prasidhati.
Stitam Sarve Prasida.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes free from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes free from the mode of passion and ignorance,
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
and thus material loss and activity are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam Prasana Manas
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
Bhagavad Tattva Vijnana
sangasya jayate.
Mukta Sanghasya Jayate.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
when these impurities are wiped away,
when those impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady in his position,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by the devotional service,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the sense of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis,
Vidyate Hridaya Granthi,
chidyante sarvasamsaya,
Chidyante Sarvasam,
shiyante jasya karmani,
Chidyante Sachakarmani,
justa evat manishvare.
Drusta Eva Manishwari.
Thus, bhakti yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
Thus the Bhakti Yoga serves the heart of the material affection
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram.
and enables one to come at once to this
Understanding of the supreme absolute truth personality of Godhead.
understanding the supreme absolute truth personality of God.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotees in the Krishna consciousness
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, text number 13. Katvango nama rajasir
Katvangunama Rajashi
Gadaja.
Muhurta.
Okay, I'm sorry. Translation. From all material activities and took shelter of the supreme safety, the personality of Godhead. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. A fully responsible man should always be conscious of the prime duty of the present human form of life. The activities to meet the immediate necessities of material life are not everything. One should always be alert in his duty for attainment of the best situation in the next life. Human life is meant for preparing ourselves for that prime duty. Maharaj Katvanga is mentioned herein as a saintly king because even within the responsibility of the state management, he was not at all forgetful of the prime duty of life. Such was the case with other Rajarsis, saintly kings, like Maharaj Yudhisthira and Maharaj Parikshit. They were all exemplary personalities on account of their being alert in discharging their prime duty. Maharaja Katvanga was invited by the demigods and the higher planets to fight demons, and as a king he fought the battles to the full satisfaction of the demigods. The demigods, being fully satisfied with him, wanted to give him some benediction for material enjoyment. But Maharaja Katvanga, being very much alert to his prime duty, inquired from the demigods about his remaining duration of life. This means that he was not as anxious to accumulate some material benediction from the demigods as he was to prepare himself for the next life. He was informed by the demigods, however, that his life would last only a moment longer. The king at once, okay, tell them to please keep quiet. He was informed by the demigods, however, that his life would last only a moment longer. The king at once left the heavenly kingdom, which is always full of material enjoyment of the highest standard, and coming down to this earth, took ultimate shelter of the all-safe personality of Godhead. He was successful in his great attempt and achieved liberation. This attempt, even for a moment, by the saintly king was successful, because he was always alert to his prime duty. Maharaj Parikshit was thus encouraged by the great Sukadeva Goswami, even though he had only 7 days left in his life, to execute the prime duty of hearing the glories of the Lord in the form of Srimad Bhagvatam. By the will of the Lord, Maharaj Parikshit instantly met the great Sukadeva Goswami, and the great treasure of spiritual success left by him is nicely mentioned in the Srimad Bhagvatam. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this purport is talking about the human being's prime duty, or most important duty, or the highest threshold of responsibility in human life. So unless we understand this, we will be diverted to many mundane things, and the result of all those mundane things will come to an end at the moment of death. And then we're going to be judged by either the Yamadutas or the Vishnu Dutas, and either we go back to Godhead, or more likely we remain in the cycle of birth and death and have to repeat again birth and growth and staying, and then giving off byproducts, and then dwindling, and then dying. All living entities are going. Number one, we are born, and then number two, we die, and number three, there's frustration and anger, and 3 and 4, and then 5, there is illusion, and there is number 6, we are harassed by all kinds of difficulties in life. So anyway, there are many unpleasant things that are going to happen in life, and because of that, we suffer. And all of this is unnecessary. All the suffering is unnecessary. It's only due to being attached to material sense gratification and false ego and an illusory conception of what is life. But there is a prime duty in life. So the history of Maharaj Katvanga is an example of someone who always kept focus on what is his prime duty. So therefore, before he accepted any material benedictions from the demigods for enhanced and prolonged sense gratification, he asked a fundamental question: how long am I going to live to enjoy these things? And it so happened that he was going to die very quickly, much quicker than Maharaj Parikshit, who has at least 7 days left. he was going to die in any moment. So therefore, he completely surrendered to Krishna and didn't waste 1 minute fantasizing or engaging in enhanced sense gratification that was promised to him. So he's an example of a great king who has tremendous material responsibilities, but throughout his whole life, he never lost sight of what is his prime duty, and that is to become progressively Krishna conscious by hearing and chanting from saintly personalities. So, therefore, Prabhupada says that by the will of the Lord, Maharaj Parikshit instantly met the great Sukadeva Goswami, and the great treasure of spiritual success left by him is nicely mentioned in the Srimad Bhagvatam. So what we're doing every day is hearing Srimad Bhagvatam. This is what our prime duty should be. And along with that, we're chanting Hare Krishna. We have darshan of the transcendental form of the Lord. And we are also taking prasadam that's been offered to the Lord. And we're engaged in devotional service, besides all the other responsibilities that we may have, material responsibilities. One can execute all their material responsibilities perfectly, but if one is not Krishna conscious, all of that is wasted. All that time, all that effort is wasted. It's for nothing. And we take birth again and start all over right from the beginning. So better we learn the value of understanding what our prime or most important duty is in life. So in order to help us focus on what our real duty is in life, Krishna comes himself and manifests transcendental pastimes in this world. And some of those pastimes are not even seen in the spiritual world. And he does this to attract us, to show us what we're missing, and to explain how we can attain this eternal life and eternal happiness, or as he says, unadulterated bliss, rather easily by chanting, dancing, feasting, hearing Bhagavatam, and preaching, and all these activities, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam, these 9 types of devotional service. So we've been discussing the pitfalls of spiritual life, and one of them is called diseased morality, and the other one is diseased religiosity. Now, most people don't understand the difference between pure devotion, pure love, and pure morality, and diseased morality, and diseased religiosity. This is a big subject, and it requires careful hearing to understand it. So, we've been talking about this for the last 4 or 5 days, and we'll continue. The reason the Lord displays the Rasa Lila is essentially to induce or attract all the fallen souls to give up their diseased morality and diseased religiosity, and to attract them to the kingdom of God to enjoy real reality. Real reality is what's going on in the spiritual world. The diseased reality is the material world, or the perverted reality is the material world. A person who actually understands what the Rasa Lila is will certainly hate to indulge in mundane sex life. For the realized soul, hearing the Lord's Rasa Lila through the proper channel will result in complete abstinence from material sexual pleasure. So, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila 431, Lord Chaitanya is explaining about Krishna's transcendental pastimes, and he says, Krishna says, pure attachment will unite us even at the expense of moral and religious duties, dharma. Destiny will sometimes bring us together and sometimes separate us. So this is being explained about the relationship of Krishna with the gopis and Radharani. So, Prabhupada explains, the gopis came out to meet Krishna at the dead of night when they heard the sound of his flute. Srila Rupa Goswami has accordingly composed a nice verse, Adi 5:224, that describes the beautiful boy called Govinda standing by the bank of the Yamuna with his flute to his lips in the shining moonlight. Those who want to enjoy life in the materialistic way of society, friendship, and love should not go to the Yamuna to see the form of Krishna. Yeah, in other words, if you want to continue life as sense gratification, don't go to Keshi Ghat and see Krishna holding the flute and being absolutely irresistibly charming. The sound of Lord Krishna's flute is so sweet that it has made the gopis forget all about their relationships with their kinsmen. That means their husband, their children, and their relatives, and cousins, and aunties, and uncles, and all that, and flee to Krishna in the dead of night. By leaving home in that way, the gopis transgress the Vedic regulations of household life. Yeah, the wife should never be separated from the husband, especially running out in the middle of the night to meet some other man. Right? This indicates that when natural feelings of love for Krishna become manifest, a devotee can neglect conventional social rules and regulations. In the material world, we are situated in designated positions only, but pure devotional service begins when one is freed from all designations. So this is Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 19:170. Sarva upadi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam hrishikena hrishikesa sevanam bhaktir uchyate. So when love for Krishna is awakened, the designated positions, or the upadis, are overcome. So upadis are false identity. Protestant, I am this, I am that. These are all false designations. I'm a member of this family. Well, which family were you a member of in your previous life? Oh, in previous life I was a dog. You know? And which family are you going to be related to in the next life? Well, I might be a demigod, or I might be an insect. So we've had many families, not just one family. We've had millions of families because we've gone through millions of births, and each time we get a family. But it doesn't mean that that is your real eternal family. Achyuta Gotra is our real family, eternal family of Krishna. But to attain that family, re-attain it, because we were in that family before, but we chose to walk away from it and got entangled in the material world. But to go back to that, we cannot jump right away to Raganuga Bhakti, as we've explained, like the International Society for Divine Love. They say you don't have to follow Sadhana Bhakti because the goal is Raganuga Bhakti. We'll give it to you right away. You know, the first day we'll make you a Raganuga. That's complete nonsense. And therefore, as I said, their guru, the founder of that, the original founder is Harivilas Maharaj, and then his disciple Keshava Maharaj, who's a criminal. He had to run away from the United States and hide somewhere in India because he abused women that were so-called, devotees. And same thing with the Kripala. Of course, it's very difficult to talk about these things because they have so many followers that think they're like, God's gift to humanity. But actually they're rogues and rascals. And now we're going to hear why. It says, the spontaneous attraction of Sri Krishna for his dearest parts and parcels, meaning the gopis, generates an enthusiasm that obliges Sri Krishna and the gopis to meet together. To celebrate this transcendental enthusiasm, there is need of a sentiment of separation between the lover and beloved. In the condition of material tribulation or trouble, no one wants the pangs of separation. But in the transcendental form, the very same separation, being absolute in its nature, strengthens the ties of love and enhances the desire of the lover and beloved to meet. This period of separation, evaluated transcendentally, is more relishable than the actual meeting, which lacks the feelings of increasing anticipation because the lover and beloved are both present. So this is an explanation of what's called vipralamba bhava, ecstatic bliss in separation. And this is explained in depth in the Srimad Bhagvatam, 10th canto. And Krishna leaves Vrindavan. Well, he never leaves Vrindavan because the gopis never stop thinking of him. But it seems that he leaves Vrindavan, and the gopis are forlorn, and the only way they can overcome their desperation in feeling that the Lord is left is to reenact the pastimes of the Lord every day and think about the Lord and meditate on his transcendental relationship with them. So this is, and always being aspiring to see the Lord. Just like we say, if someone says, oh, last night Krishna appeared in my kitchen, and he sat down at my kitchen table, and I gave him a cup of coffee, and we had a long discussion. That's a bunch of nonsense. And as we've said before, even Yogananda, he says that he had darshan of Krishna who was standing on the windowsill of a hotel room that he had in Mumbai in 1933 or 1931. If you read his autobiography of a yogi, he explains this. That this is all nonsense. None of this is true, but it's all made up. It's just so that they can be important, Or they say, oh, I am the present incarnation of Krishna. I am the present avatar. Well, that's another nonsense. It's Nityananda's so-called present or actual avatar of Krishna. All these people are liars. They're scoundrels. They have no understanding of spiritual life. And they're misleading similar people who are stupid and lusty. So this spontaneous attraction of Krishna with the gopis, they have what's called transcendental enthusiasm. But in order to increase that enthusiasm, sometimes there's a sentiment of separation. Well, even Shakespeare said, absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? But that's somewhat in the mundane sense, but it gives you an idea. You start with the known to understand the unknown. But here, Prabhupada very eloquently is explaining the highest level of spiritual bliss experienced by the gopis and Krishna. So then the next verse, where he continues to explain this, is Adi Lila 432. And there it says, I shall taste the essence of all these rasas, and in this way I shall favor all the devotees. And then 433, Adi Lila 433 says, then by hearing about the pure love of the residents of Vraja, devotees will worship me on the path of spontaneous love, abandoning all rituals of religiosity and fruitive activity. So here Prabhupada explains, many realized souls, such as Raghunath Das Goswami and King Kalushakara, who is an Alvar, right? South Indian Vaishnava, and it's an Alvar. Some of the Alvars, at least one of them was born like right after Krishna disappeared. I think that was Nam Alvar. Maybe there was one before him that was present during the time of Krishna. And then the rest of the Alvars come after Krishna, but still not too far away from his disappearance. So all the Alvars are devotees of Krishna. It doesn't matter what the Sri Vaishnavas say, that Krishna's expansion of Narayana, blah, blah, blah. But the real Alvars themselves, they're devotees of Krishna, every one of them. And especially this King Kalushakar, he wrote the Mukundamala Sutram. So anyway, first of all, Prabhupada talks of Raghunath Das Goswami, but he mentions also King Kalushakar. Both have recommended with great emphasis that one develop the spontaneous love of Godhead, even at the risk of transgressing all the traditional codes of morality and religiosity. Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavana, has written in his prayers called the Mana Shiksha, which we have here if you want to read it, that one should simply worship Radha and Krishna with all attention. And then the verse is Nadarmam Naadarmam Shrutigana Niruktam Kilakuru. One should not be much interested in performing Vedic rituals or simply following rules and regulations. King Kalushakar has written similarly in his book Mukunda Mala Sutra, Nastadarme Navasu Nichaya, and so forth. I have no attraction for performing religious rituals or holding any earthly kingdom. I do not care for sense enjoyments. Let them appear and disappear in accordance with my previous deeds. My only desire is to be fixed in devotional service to the lotus feet of the Lord, even though I may continue to take birth here, life after life. So in other words, this is very similar to what Lord Chaitanya says, Nadanam, Najanam, Nasundaram, Kavitam Va Jagadish Kamaye, Mama Janmani Janmani Sware, Bhavatad Bhaktira Haitaki Twai. I'm not interested in any amount of wealth, I don't want any followers, and I'm not even interested in being liberated from birth and death. All I want is to be engaged in a devotional service, Krishna. So then Adi Lila 434 goes even farther and says that Krishna manifests his eternal human-like form and performs his pastimes to show mercy to the devotees. Having heard such pastimes, one should engage in service to him. So we're hearing his pastimes right now, right? The whole goal of this is to become convinced that my real prime duty in life is devotional service, rendered with love and devotion and especially affection for Krishna. This text is from Srimad Bhagvatam 10:33-36. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has innumerable expansions of his transcendental form who eternally exist in the spiritual world. This material world is only a perverted reflection of the spiritual world, where everything is manifested without inebriety, inebriety meaning intoxication, intoxicated by false ego, intoxicated by sense gratification, intoxicated by false pride, and so forth. There, in the spiritual world, everything is in its original existence, free from the domination of time. In other words, time is the destroyer of in the material world, but time in the spiritual world is a supporter. So we perceive time as past, present, and future in the material world. In the spiritual world, time is perceived by its non-passage. Therefore, there's what's called the eternal present. It's a major difference between the material world and the spiritual world. So time supports the devotee's love for Krishna in the spiritual world, and time deteriorates everything in the material world. So there, everything is in its original existence free from the domination of time. Time cannot deteriorate or interfere with the conditions in the spiritual world, where different manifestations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are the recipients of the worship of different living entities in their constitutional spiritual positions. Okay, what does that mean? It says, time cannot deteriorate or interfere with the conditions in the spiritual world, where different manifestations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, meaning he appears there as Krishna, and then Balaram, and then first Chaturvyuha, then Narayana, then the second Chaturvyuha, and then the Vishnu incarnations for the material creation. So he's there in many different forms. There's millions and billions of Narayanas, so there are millions and billions of Vaikuntha planets. And according to the way he holds the four objects, the Sankha, Chakra, Gada, and so forth. He can hold it in different ways. See? So there are different manifestations of Narayana. Then it's also Lord Rama is in the spiritual world. And there are so many other avatars in the spiritual world. All these things are going on. So therefore it says that time cannot deteriorate or interfere with the conditions in the spiritual world where different manifestations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are recipients of the worship of different living entities in their constitutional spiritual positions. So one person wants to worship the form of Narayana. Another person wants to worship Lord Rama. Another person wants to worship Krishna in Goloka. So Krishna is present in millions of different forms to receive the service of the devotees who love him in a specific, according to their constitutional spiritual positions. So, therefore, Krishna is also present as Parthasarati in the spiritual world. And this is the way Arjuna wants to worship the Lord. Or Bhisma Dev wants to worship the Lord. So, and when he's on the chariot and driving Arjuna's chariot, taking orders from Arjuna, and then he jumps off the chariot to save Arjuna's life by running toward Bhisma Deva with spinning the wheel like a chakra. So when he does things like that, he's in Narayana form. And even here, when we're worshiping Radha and Krishna in opulence, we're actually worshiping them in the form of Krishna and Rukmini, or in Lakshmi Narayana, because the worship of Krishna is done in pristine, natural setting, like in Vrindavan. It's very simple. But the way we're worshiping the deities, and Prabhupada explains this, we're worshiping them like the worship of Lakshmi Narayana in opulence. So, incarnations. If one takes advantage of this highest kind of material form, one can regain his position of devotional service to the Lord. No, wait a minute. It says here, I'm sorry. The saying that the human form of life is the best position for devotional service has its special significance, because only in this form can a living entity revive his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The human form is considered the highest state in the cycle of the species of life in the material world. If one takes advantage of this highest kind of material form, one can regain his position of devotional service to the Lord. So it's very rare to take birth as a human being. Of course, most people don't understand this. It's so dumbed down by modern education, and all modern education is organized by the demons in order to take people away from Krishna. And they start right in kindergarten, filling kids' brains with junk, with gobar, so that they grow up to be sense gratifiers and don't believe in God. Or if they believe in God, it's in the form of diseased religiosity and diseased morality, which we'll get to in a few minutes. So incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead appear in all the species of life, although this is inconceivable to the human brain. Yeah, Krishna appears not only as Matsya, Kurma, and Nrsinga and so forth, he appears in every species of life. He incarnates in every species of life because they're all living entities and they all need to be inspired to go back to Godhead. That, of course, is inconceivable for the karmis. The Lord's pastimes are differentiated according to the appreciating capacity of the different types of bodies of the living entities. So, dogs can appreciate the Lord in one way. Cats can appreciate the Lord maybe in a little different way. Snakes can appreciate the Lord in some way. So according to the, as it says here, appreciating capacity of the different types of bodies of the living entities, the Supreme Lord bestows the most merciful benediction upon human society. When he appears in his human form, it is then that humanity gets the opportunity to engage in different kinds of eternal service to the Lord. Special natural appreciation of the descriptions of a particular pastime of Godhead indicates the constitutional position of living entity. In other words, some people might be attracted of some special pastime of the Lord, and they're like myself. I'm attracted to the story of Gajendra, the elephant, who completely surrendered, who was bitten by the crocodile and then completely surrendered to the Lord. Somebody else can be attracted to something, it's another pastime of the Lord. So this means special natural appreciation of the descriptions of a particular pastime of Godhead indicates the constitutional position of the living entity. Adoration, which is neutrality, servitorship, which is dasya, friendship, which is sakya, and parental affection, which is and conjugal love, madhurya, are the 5 primary relationships with Krishna. The highest perfectional stage of the conjugal relationship, enriched by many sentiments, gives the maximum relishable mellow to the devotee. Now, this is a very significant statement when it says enriched by many sentiments. What does that mean? Well, we have to go back to English to understand what this means. There's a difference between sexual love and romantic love. I don't know if you know the difference, but you can look it up in the dictionary. The difference is whenever Krishna is engaged in romantic affairs in the spiritual world, there's no hint of sexuality involved. What does it mean exactly? Well, even in English, romantic means conducive or characterized by expressions of love or an idealized view of reality. Being romantic is about expressing love and dedication in a way that is intentional, unmistakable, and deeply affectionate. It often involves dramatic or passionate gestures. Those smaller actions that indicate enduring affection can also be romantic. In other words, even in English, when they use the word romantic in its pure sense, has no connotation of sexuality. It's talking about this genuine love and affection manifested in many different ways that are all enduring. Okay, so that gives an idea of what is talked about, what is meant by erotic pastimes of the Lord with the gopis. There's no mention of mundane sex. So this is going to be explained in more in depth. And it says that this Sarva Upadi Vinir Muktam Tat Parat Vena Nirmalam Hishikena Hishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchate. So this means that bhakti, or devotional service, means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master of all the senses. When the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there are 2 side effects. One is freed from all material designations, and one's senses are purified simply by being employed in the service of the Lord. And this is a verse quoted from the Narada Pancharatra, and it's also found in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Okay, so now, to understand this even more deeply, we have to go to Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila 5, 226. where it says, if one criticizes a devotee of the Lord, for that offense he cannot be liberated. Rather, he will fall into a terrible hellish condition. What more should I say? Prabhupada explains, in the Bhakti Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami has stated that those who are actually very serious about devotional service do not differentiate between the form of the Lord made of clay, metal, stone, or wood, and the original form of the Lord. In the material world, a person in his photograph, picture, or statue are different. But the statue of Lord Krishna and Krishna himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are not different because the Lord is absolute. What we call wood, stone, metal are energies of the Supreme Lord, and energies are never separate from the energetic. As we have several times explained, no one can separate the sunshine energy from the energetic sun. Therefore, material energy may appear separate from the Lord, but transcendentally, it is non-different from the Lord. In other words, what this is talking about is not differentiating between Krishna and his form, and not making up stories that, the deity is just stone, but etc. The Lord can appear anywhere and everywhere because his diverse energies are distributed everywhere like sunshine. We should therefore understand whatever we see to be the energy of the Supreme Lord and should not differentiate between the Lord and his archa form or his deity form made from clay, metal, wood, and so forth. Okay. Srimad Bhagvatam has condemned those who think the body to be the self as Boma Ijyadi. Boma means the earth, and Ijyadi means worshipper. There are two kinds. So one who worships the body, which is born in a particular family, particular race, particular country, etc. So there are two types of Boma Ijyadi: those who worship the land of their birth, such as nationalists, or who make many sacrifices for the motherland, and those who condemn the worship of the form of the Lord. Okay, so we discussed this yesterday, but then going even further, it says, Asat Sangha Tyaga, Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 2287, E Vaishnava Achara, Sri Sangi Ekas Asadu Krishna Bhakta Ara. A Vaishnava should always avoid the association of ordinary people. Common people are very much materially attached, especially to women. Vaishnavas should avoid the company of those who are not devotees of Lord Krishna. So this verse, Asat Sangha Tyaga E Vaishnavachar, this is the defining quality of a devotee. The devotee will avoid the association of materialistic people, especially those who are attached to sense gratification. That doesn't mean he won't preach to them. He'll take the risk of preaching to such people, but he won't associate with them. He's sitting down and eating a meal, whether eating meat or hearing nonsense spoken by them, etc. Then the second part of that verse, Sri Sangi Eka Asadu, Krishna Bhakta Ara, which means that one should avoid the company of those who are not devotees of Lord Krishna, especially those people who are very attached to sense gratification. However, the unbona fide Vaishnavas in Bengal, they take this verse, the second line of the verse, Sri Sangi Eka Asadu Krishna Bhakta Ara, and they misinterpret it. And they say, this means that a person who's only attached to one woman is nonsense. Therefore, one should have many women. And that's exactly what they do. You see, the alls, the balls, all those, the upper sampradayas, the false sampradayas, they claim some kind of lineage to Nityananda or Advaitacharya, and they sing very melodious kirtans, and sometimes they cry, sometimes they swoon, sometimes they faint in ecstasy. And then after that, you see them smoking biddies and philandering with women. You see? And they've made a joke of Krishna consciousness. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had to really oppose these people and reveal that they were not actually bona fide Vaishnavas. But how did they justify their activity? They'll take a verse like this, Sri Sangi Eka Asadu, Krishna Bhakta Ara, and misinterpret it, play around with the words, and give new interpretations. So, then a lecture Prabhupada gave in Melbourne, May 21st, 1975, a devotee asked Prabhupada a question. He said, how much more difficult is it for one born in a family of non-devotees to become a devotee than a person who has been born in a family like Prabhupada's? So Prabhupada answered, Sadhu Sangha means you have to give up the association of non-devotees. This question was asked to Sri Chaitanya by a devotee. He was a householder. So he inquired, my dear sir, what is the real standard of behavior of a devotee? Lord Chaitanya immediately answered that Asat Sangha Tyaga E Vaishnava Achara. Madhya Lila 2287. Vaishnava devotee, his first behavior is he should give up unwanted association. That is first. Now the next question will be, what is that unwanted association? He answered, Asat Eka Sri Sangi Krishna Bhakta Ara. This unwanted association means people who are too much attached to sex life. They are unwanted. And another non-devotee of God, they are unwanted. So, meaning like the Mayavadis and the atheists. So you must avoid the association of people who are attached to sense gratification, also the Mayavadis and also the atheists. They are unwanted. So you be careful not to mix with these people and come to the devotional service, then your life is perfect. So the devotee asked another question. Srila Prabhupada, does a disciple first accept a spiritual master within his heart when he takes initiation? So that's another issue. So then there's another discussion that Prabhupada had with a person called Yogi Amrit Desai, who's a disciple of, guess who? The person that we talked about before, Harivilas Maharaj. Prabhupada, when Lord Chaitanya learned that Junior Haridas had committed suicide, he did not regret it. He said, yes, this is the just punishment. You see how much strict Lord Chaitanya was. And he said, Asat Sangha, Yositam Sangi Sangha. He said that one must avoid the association of people who are strongly attached to sense gratification and abusing women, let's say. And then he quoted a verse, Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 11.8. Niskinchanasya Bhagavan Bhajan Mukasya, and so forth, which means, greatly lamenting, the Lord then informed Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, alas, for a person who is seriously desiring to cross the material ocean and engage in a transcendental loving service to the Lord without material motives, seeing a materialist engaged in sense gratification, or seeing a woman who is similarly interested, is more abominable than drinking poison willingly. So in other words, Prabhupada said to this Yogi Amrit Desai, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's sampradaya is very strict. Okay, so then and then he also says in a purport to that verse, in the Kinchanasya, he says, thus there is a spiritual nature beyond this material world, and that spiritual nature exists eternally. Spiritual advancement means stopping material activities and entering into spiritual activities. This is the process of bhakti yoga. In the material world, the via media for sense gratification is mainly a woman. One who is seriously interested in spiritual life should strictly avoid associating with fallen women. A sannyasi should never see a man or woman for material benefit. In addition, talks with materialistic men and women are also dangerous, and they are compared to drinking poison. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very strict on this point. He therefore refused to see King Prataparudra, who was naturally always engaged in political and economic affairs. The Lord even refused to see the king, despite the request of a personality like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was the Lord's intimate friend and devotee. So then, we go back to King Kalushakar. He, in the 5th sutra to the Mukundamala Sotram, he says, "O my Lord, I have no attachment for religiosity or for accumulating wealth or for enjoying sense gratification. Let these come as they inevitably must, in accordance with my past deeds. But I do pray for this most cherished boon, birth after birth, let me render unflinching devotional service unto your 2 lotus feet." So here, Kalushakar Maharaj is saying the same thing that Lord Chaitanya said. Right? And Prabhupada writes, human beings advance toward God consciousness when they go beyond the gross materialistic life of eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating, and begin to develop moral and ethical principles. These principles develop further into religious consciousness, leading to an imaginary conception of God without any practical realization of the truth. He's talking about Mayavad philosophy. These stages of God consciousness are called religiosity, which promises material prosperity of various degrees. This is what Prabhupada means by diseased religiosity. And this is what most people practice. So, human beings advance toward God consciousness when they go beyond the gross materialistic life of eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating, and begin to develop moral and ethical principles. Just like Arjuna, it was arguing on the basis of moral and ethical principles why he should not fight in the battle of Kurukshetra, right? That is what's called diseased morality. And then diseased religiosity is these principles of moral and ethical principles develop further into religious consciousness, leading to an imaginary conception of God, meaning Mayavad, or impersonal conception, without any practical realization of the truth. Yeah, Mayavadis say Vaikuntha doesn't exist, Goloka doesn't exist, it's all fairy tales, there's only Brahman, there's nothing beyond that thing. People who develop this conception of religiosity perform sacrifices, give in charity, and undergo different types of austerity and penance, all with the view of being rewarded with material prosperity. The ultimate goal of such so-called religious people is sense gratification of various kinds. For sense gratification, material prosperity is necessary, and therefore they perform religious rituals with a view toward the resultant material name, fame, and gain. This is called Satya Narayana Puja. This is why they do it. You know, sometimes they do it once a month, or once a year, or once every 5 years. But the whole point, although they're doing puja, they're worshiping Vishnu with 16 articles, like we do every morning. But they're doing it for material name, fame, gain, and material prosperity. Now, the Christians do the same thing. They have what's called prosperity theology. Let me read you what that is. And I'm telling you, the Buddhists do the same thing. The Muslims do the same thing. So let's see what this Christian prosperity theology. Prosperity theology, sometimes referred to as the prosperity gospel, the health and wealth gospel, the gospel of success, manifesting abundance, or seed faith, is a religious belief among some Protestant Christians that financial blessing and physical well-being are always the will of God for them. and that faith, positive speech, and donations to religious causes will increase one's material wealth. Prosperity theology has been criticized by leaders from various Christian denominations, including within the Pentecostal and charismatic movements, who maintain that it is irresponsible, promotes idolatry, and is contrary to Scripture. Secular as well as some Christian observers have also criticized prosperity theology as exploitative of the poor. The practices of some preachers have attracted scandal, and some have been charged with financial fraud. Prosperity theology views the Bible as a contract between God and humans. If humans have faith in God, He will deliver security and prosperity. The doctrine emphasizes the importance of personal empowerment, proposing that it is God's will for people to be blessed. The atonement or reconciliation with God is interpreted to include the alleviation of sickness and poverty, which are viewed as curses to be broken by faith. This is believed to be achieved through donations of money, visualization, and positive confession. It was during the healing revivals in the 1950s that prosperity theology first came to prominence in the United States, although commentators have linked the origins of its theology to the New Thought movement, which began in the 19th century. The prosperity teaching later figured prominently in the Word of Faith movement in the 1980s, televangelism. In the 1990s and 2000s, it was adopted by influential leaders into Pentecostal movement and charismatic movement in the United States and has spread throughout the world. Prominent leaders in the development of prosperity theology include E.W. Kenyon, Oral Roberts, A.A. Allen, Robert Tilton, T.L. Osborne, Joel Osteen, who's still around, Creflo Dollar, and this guy's a crook. He's been prosecuted. Kenneth Copeland, Reverend Ike, and Kenneth Hagin. So anyway, we won't go into the rest of it. So all the Satya Narayana Pujas in India and the United States, and all the prosperity theology, and all the blessings in Buddhism, which are material blessings, and all the Muslim so-called blessings, it's all based on material advancement and improving sense gratification. Yeah, you'll get 70 virgins in heaven if you strap this bomb and blow up some Americans, right? So what is 70 virgins in Jannat? That is sense gratification, right? And the same thing is the whole Karmakanda section of the Vedas. It's all about sense gratification. So this is what is meant by diseased morality and diseased religiosity. But then Prabhupada says, but genuine religion is different. In Sanskrit, such genuine religion is called dharma, which means the essential quality of the living being. What is that? The essential quality of every living being is service. Either you serve Maya or you serve Krishna, but you're always a servant of something or somebody. And if you don't have anyone to serve, then you serve a dog. And we see many people serving dogs. Now in India, too. They're up in the morning walking their dog in Delhi, Mumbai. You see that? Yeah. That was never there before, right? Nehru taught them this because he had a dog. You see how Nehru actually is a demon. He completely corrupted people. Okay, we'll stop right there and continue. There's a lot more of this to finish. We'll continue tomorrow. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You see that Lord Chaitanya's movement is about the highest level of love of God. And he's not compromising at all. But you can gradually attain that. You don't attain it right away. None of us attain it right away. It's a gradual process. But we have to see all the pitfalls in that process. And that's why we're hearing this. Hare Krishna. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma. Mandamui Savadana Mate. Janara Prasadevaya E Bhavatoriya Jai. Krishna Prapti Oya Hoite. Guru Mukha Padma Vaikya Chittete Koriya Magya. Arana Koriya Mane Asarana Koriya Mane Asar. Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utamagati. Prasade Pure Sarva Asa. Chakshudan Dilaje Chanme Chanme Prabhu Se. Chakshudana Dilaje Chanme Chanme Prabhu Se. Divya Gyan De Prokasido. Divya Gyan De Prokasido. Divya Gyan De Prokasido. Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasa Jate. Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasa Jate. Vedika Janara Charito. Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu. Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu. Lokanath Lokana Jivana. Lokera Jivana. Ha Prabhu Kora Doya Deha Mori Padachaya. Ha Prabhu Kora Doya Deha Mori Padachaya. padachaya. Ha Prabhu Kora Daya Deha More Padachaya. Ebe Asuda Sakti Bhuvana. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Pasyadya Dezatarine. Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna. Haribo, Haribo, Gora Haribo, Nitai Gora Haribo, Nitai Gora Hari. Gaura Premanandi Ki Jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramansa Paravaja Gachasta Tarasatara Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sikha Hosha Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunti Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Shri Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Jamuna Maya Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the Samudra. All glories to the Samudras. All glories to the Samudra. All glories to Shikuru and Shikuranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavana Ki Jai. The lotus feet of our spiritual master, the only way by which we can attain to pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great honor and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is perfection and fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him, ecstatic prema emanates. By him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and Lord and master of devotees. Oh, Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.